We're going to go ahead and get started. I get the honor of having this first panel, so I'm super excited to introduce this group that's ahead of us here. One of the things that, when you hear the word sustainability, what's the first word that comes to mind for you? Anyone? This is where we do the engagement. What's the first word? What do you think of? Long term. What else? Healthy. Sorry? Eco-friendly. Scalable. Nice. Perfect. Well, one of the words I'm actually kind of surprised you didn't come up with is carbon. It is one of the words that we've kind of figured out in sustainability and regenerative ag that we hear a lot about. People tend to right away go to this thought about carbon. And so what we asked this panel to do is to come in and help us think about sustainability, a lot of the things that you mentioned, and especially beyond just what carbon is. I think that a lot of you see this every single day with consumers and maybe some in your own life, that we think about where does our food come from? Not many years ago, we didn't really think about that. That was just we had food. I remember taking my niece to a grocery store and she had absolutely no idea where that milk came from. And so having to walk through that. Today, I think we would say that consumers are always asking, where does their food come from? They want to understand it more. They want to understand how it's grown. And so in turn, a lot of your customers, a lot of our growers are asking questions of you as retailers about how do I grow a food crop instead of just growing a commodity grain crop? And so this group is going to share some of their experiences. I'm just thrilled to have this diverse group to start this day off. Sustainability has been something through my career that I've spent some time working on, and I think they're going to be able to share some of those really cool thoughts and some ideas and just maybe some thought-provoking things for you to consider as we go through this conversation. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you each to just briefly introduce yourselves and tell us about your background, and then we'll have a discussion. I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then, as I mentioned, I'm going to ask you to share some thoughts or ask a few questions also. Nelson, I'll let you go first. Push the button up.
Okay. Thanks for having me. So my name is Nelson Carter. I grew up on a farm in North Texas. We raised wheat, corn, and hay. Ended up moving into a technology role and went overseas for a number of years, came back and converted one of our farms into a direct consumer farm. We were heavily into poultry, so we sold eggs and meat poultry to restaurants in Dallas and Fort Worth, had our own state-inspected on-site processing facilities for the meat birds and the eggs. Today I work for a company called Aimpoint Research. We're a strategic intelligence and research company focused on agriculture. We look across the agri-food value chain, everything from the farm gate to the consumer and restaurants. And we look closely at like the psychographics and the psychology of farming and how that's going to impact our clients, which are, again, farm credits, co-ops, ag retailers, and such. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Luke.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luke Petersen. I am Regenerative Ag Specialist with the Nature Conservancy, and I sit on our North America Agriculture team. I physically sit in my home office in southern Michigan, and when I'm not sitting, I'm doing my part as the fifth generation on our family's farm in the southwest part of Michigan. Just a real quick overview of the Nature Conservancy, or TNC, for those who may not be as familiar, especially with our ag work. So we are a global nonprofit, 5,000 plus staff working in 77 countries around the world. And we work on everything from land preservation to public policy to partnerships with private industry to really see our impact scale on the ground. And at the core of our ag work is, the fact that farmers and ranchers and their partners, you all in this room, are just a critical part of any realistic solution to some of our biggest environmental and societal threats that we face today. So at the North America level, I won't get into the total breadth of work that we do. A lot of the on the ground action happens through our state chapters. We have a business unit in every state. But I'm super excited to be here today because my main focus of work is working with trusted farm advisors. So we all know in this room that farmers go first to their retailer, to their agronomist, to their other service providers to get information that influences their on-farm decisions. So we see and have heavily invested in this opportunity. We see retailers as being crucial to really taking regenerative agriculture to scale. And we do this through a few different strategies that I'll hopefully get at throughout the day today. But just want to say, really excited after all the conversations and presentations last night, because I think that you retailers in this room are really at the leading edge of thinking about how this industry is changing. And we see, digital enablement and sustainability and also traceability is really all going hand in hand. So thank you for having us here, and this is a great platform for us to kind of tell you about what we're doing.
Yeah, good morning. Carl Dickinson, have the honor of being the president and CEO of Central Valley Ag. We're based out of York, Nebraska, kind of your traditional cooperative of grain and agronomy, energy and feed and services. Really my pleasure to be here. Appreciate the invite. I think the work that's being done by AgVend and the people in this room is transformative. I've spent my 30 years in the cooperative business now, so I am the old guy that you were referencing earlier. But I think what has kept me excited about this industry over the years, frankly, is that we've got to continue to change how we do business. And we have not moved the mark as far as we would have liked to, frankly, with our producers. So I'm excited to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Carl. I said old friends, not old, just to clarify. And I would consider Carl an old friend for sure. So thank you guys so much for those great introductions. And we'll go ahead and get started. While I was sitting here listening, I realized that I'm the only one without the cool socks, too. So great job, you three. We didn't even plan that, so that's fantastic. So Carl, I'm actually going to start with you from the beginning, just because of some of your experiences around retail in sustainability and thinking about some of the things that you talked about. So you mentioned it, that this is a very innovative group of retailers, and some of the things that CVA have done in the space is very innovative. Can you share some things around some examples where you've seen that success work? And we'll talk about maybe some of those hurdles in a minute too, but tell us about some of the areas that you've seen, not only just CVA, but other retailers have success in this area.
Yeah, so it gets to be such a large topic. It's hard to break it down like you'd like to, but certainly we, as most, when we started talking about sustainability, we started with carbon sequestration, right? That was where we all started, and it became fairly evident to us pretty quick that probably sequestering carbon in agricultural soils is not the cheapest method to do that, and so we quickly moved to soil health. I think is really where we went in a big hurry, and then frankly, appreciate the speaker last night in that we struggle with data off the farm, right? Capturing data, and the bottom line is we have not shown the grower an application that excites him today, and so we would tell you that. I'll get to the point here quickly, but we will tell you that less than 15% of our growers know and understand their break-evens or run their operation with any type of business acumen. So, frankly, the sustainability issue has allowed us to begin to capture data to help improve ROI on the farm just in using the data that was there to get to whether it's carbon sequestration or whatever else sort of soil health issues that we're dealing with. So we get the opportunity to begin to show the value of business acumen on the farm is probably the biggest issue, and then we begin to look at the components of that, and that's how we get there. So those have been we have several growers, and we're like any. We've had minor successes in getting our farmers paid for sustainability in a few places, but the biggest gain, the biggest ROI has really become in changing of their production practices to increase their ROIs, frankly.
Great, thank you. Luke, I know from the Nature Conservancy, there's quite a few different programs that you have available for retailers specifically to work with their growers on. We'll talk a little later about a Purdue study that we've used in the past to think about different services, but tell us a little bit about some of those ideas and things that TNC has done to help retailers where you've seen them be successful.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think one thing that I wanted to touch on my intro too is just that we are living in a time right now where there's more interest in sustainability, both from farmers as well as all the way down the value chain to the consumers, and that's leading to that. We all know there's just this huge influx of investment from public dollars through IRA and the climate smart commodity grants, and also through corporate ESG initiatives. So there's an opportunity right now that hasn't been here necessarily in the past to kind of push retail along this sort of transition into new business models. And one of the biggest barriers that both growers and I think retailers face too, as well, is just some of these changes are expensive to invest in upfront. So a lot of the sort of traditional cost share programs for farmers have been on a per acre basis, but that doesn't really help with having to buy a new cover crop seeder or new technology to do better nutrient management. So one of the things that TNC has been working on in Minnesota is around a cost share program that's both available to farmers as well as their retail partners to actually do cost share on some of these pieces of technology and equipment that are necessary to do these practices. And this has been really successful so far. There's a lot of demand, and there was a lot of success stories from that. And what I want to emphasize with this is just this sort of opportunity that we have right now. This is a great chance for retail to get involved through some of these programs that can shoulder some of that risk, because it is hard to change how farm production happens, and it's hard to change how business happens. So I would just encourage you to kind of look for those types of opportunities. After the sort of funders heard about these success stories from the retailers on this equipment cost share program, the state of Minnesota decided to put a bunch more money into this. So retail has to be part of these kind of public policy conversations too, and helping to kind of drive resources so that we can change more efficiently and faster.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think in any state that you're part of, to get out and get engaged is an important aspect. And I know there's a few of our AgVend retailers right in the room that are part of that program that you're talking about. And I've brought on conservation agronomists to really help drive this so that there's someone that's accountable at your retail location that can help drive some of these things forward and make sure that it's available for the growers to just be aware is a big piece.
Tracy, let me weigh in there because I think it's a major point. We were talking about it at breakfast this morning. Farming has been a highly profitable business, especially the last 10 years. Frankly, our agronomy divisions in these cooperatives or ag retail has also been highly profitable for probably the last 25 years. It's probably driven most of the economic value in most of our organizations. Getting those groups to change is difficult because they've already been winning. So we've got to make sure that we're coming up with a value proposition that allows them to say that this is going to be better than what you've had. And frankly, the retailers in this room, Central Valley Ag included, we've made huge investment in trying to lead that effort. But from an ROI standpoint, sustainability, frankly, is a net red number for us today. And it's an investment we're making, once again, because we believe we've got to transform into raising food. But I think we really got to think about and really have to be attuned to that there's very little reason for people that are successful to change what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be resistant to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it also, I've heard you guys talk about this in the past around just helping people make that change before they have to make the change. So when we think about some of the government policy that's out there, thoughts that you guys have, all three of you, around how you've been able to be involved in some of that to just show that value, maybe not all the way to the ROI even, Carl, but so that people want to make the change instead of this point where that gets forced on them and then people will tend to push back. Any thoughts around that and how you've been involved in those conversations?
You're asking farmers proactively moving towards those programs.
Yeah. No, on your segmentation, anything you've seen?
Well, yeah, on the, and we could talk a lot about the psychographics of it. Those farmers with the greater business acumen that are more forward-leaning, our research has shown that they're more open to those programs. They see where it's going. So, you know, you can divide farmers through segmentation and understand which ones are more apt to lean into those programs more than others. That's probably a different conversation altogether. But I would say this, from an ag retailer standpoint, understanding those psychographic segmentations is helpful in knowing where to put your efforts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an important point, because if you try to go out to your whole mass, I would assume, Carl, you probably don't have as much success as when you try to figure out maybe some quick wins, or starting with a group or a segment of growers that are going to be more likely and be leaders in this space. No different than this retail group that we have here, going to be first to lead and first to move forward.
Yeah, I would agree. There is a portion, 15 to 20% of early adopters that are always wanting to do new and different things, maybe have a different value structure around what's important to them. It's not all ROI, right? Some of it is preserving land for future generations or whatever it may be. And so those are your easy wins. Those are your easier wins. But once again, it doesn't get us then to where we're going to need to be, because the food system is still based off it. You've got to scale it to have an effect. And if you can't scale it, then it becomes a mute issue, and you got a nice little program that you get asked to be on panels about, but that's probably all it does. So I think that therein lies the challenge, is continuing to search for and find that golden banana, so to speak, that gets you transported. I mean, so Central Valley Ag operates 1,310 car shuttle loaders today. And combined, we'll ship a lot of 110 car unit trains of commodity number 2 yellow corn and soybeans, and that's still the focus of what's being raised. So we've got to transfer. You start with the early adopters, you find your successes, then you take those successes and infiltrate it across is the direction it's got to go.
So I think we talked about some of the positives of this, but you just bring up one of the most important struggles is when you have that many shuttle loaders, sometimes you have to have a big enough group to make it even possible for you to segregate grains, do traceability. So let's just transition a little bit into what some of the struggles are for you, what you see with retailers, what you've established with retailers, and we'll talk a little bit from the grower side, but just tell a little bit where you see some of those hurdles. You can start wherever you like.
On traceability specifically?
Any of those, any spot you see hurdles in this space of why it's taken us a little bit to get growers to, or retailers to want to be part of this transformation. I think you're right. Traceability is a big piece of that. So you go ahead, start with that. That's a good topic.
Well, I think it might be worth considering where traceability is originating. So it's not originating with the farmer. It's not even originating really with the ag retailer. It's originating with the consumer. So, in terms of how that's worked its way down through the value chain, it's one of those things that is going to be obligatory. The consumers are having demands. The CPGs, and for the sake of this room, the grocery retailers, are fully on board with this. So it's one of those things that the farmers are going to have to respond to. Technology is quickly catching up to it, and the ag retailers are certainly in the best position to help them navigate that. I think also the size and scale of some of the ag retailers can make that connection with the size and scope of some of the CPGs and the grocery retailers as well. So to make that link, I think they're in a good position to do that. Thanks. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Yeah, I think we'll probably come back to that a little bit more.
Okay.
I think we got to answer, maybe answer a different question the same way. Is that in ag, what we have done is we've raised what we want, the way we want to raise it, and we deliver it when we want to. That's how ag is traditionally operated, and it's become around efficiency, and that's why we have shuttle loaders and the change becomes, and if we look at ag over time, and it really started with chickens first, chickens, turkeys, poultry, then went to hogs, and you look at what drove some of those things, where people began to raise what people want, the way they wanted it raised, and delivering it when they want it. And the reason we started where we did was genetic turnaround. In row crop, we get one genetic turnaround a year. That's not very fast. In poultry, I don't know, we get 7 or 8. Then we went to swine. Second controllable factor was your environment. You could put it under a barn. You could control the temperature. You had many more controllables. So weather is a big factor when it comes into this. But the change has got to become what we're talking to our producers about. We run a value added. We don't say specialty grain. We say value added. We're running a value added program. Started that about 5 years ago. That just, for information's sake, handled about 22 million bushels of value-added crop last year. Net profit to the co-op was a little over $90 million on 22 million bushels of grain. So if you understand the grain business, highly profitable business. The focus, frankly, is helping our producers to raise what people want, the way they want it raised, and delivering it when they want it. So those are all buyer calls, and so the farmer actually stores that crop until we call for it and comes in. When we started that, we've been in some of that. White corn would be a great example, non-GMO white, food grade, those types of crops. When we started into that business some years ago, it was profitable for the farmer, it was profitable for the co-op, but there wasn't a lot of traceability that went into that. Today, we've got full traceability of everything that goes into that crop, and once again, with what's going on in Mexico and the non-GMO, we're going to have to prove that becomes very valuable. I get a little caught up, and I think it's an important discussion as we've talked to CPGs and as we've worked in the value-added space, is that CPGs tend to want to still deal in a commodity crop but get a value-added crop, and they tend to want to say, if you want to sell it to us, you will do X, X, and X. And we're saying, no, we will do whatever you want us to do, you just have to pay us for it. And we've found some successes and some failures. But I think it's going to be really important as ag retail, who represents the farmer. I think those go hand in hand. That we maintain a position that we will bring you value added, but there has to be a reward for it. Otherwise, there's no. And we think there'll be a bifurcation of the producer base. We will have large economic farmers. We're all hearing about the consolidation on the farm. We know 60,000 farmers are going to raise 75% of the value of all crops going into the future. But I would tell you, if you go down to the numbers and if you go down to the acres, those numbers will change some, and we'll have producers that run large economic farms who are really going to be about more traditional agronomic practices and the way that they do things, and we're going to have the people that are beginning to raise food. And we think it's going to be real important. We'll say the co-op, but probably the ag retailer. We think it's going to be really important that the ag retailer stands in the middle, because we also know that our farmers don't deal with contracts well. They never have. They've tended to lever their way through contracts. I'll sign the contract, I'll do everything the contract says, but if I don't, I expect you to do it, otherwise I won't do business with you no more, right? And that's not going to work very well with the CPG. They will come take your farm. So we think it's going to be important that the co-op plays that role in the middle on that too. So I think traceability is just a component of a bigger psychological change, that we are going to raise things for others the way they want it done, as long as we get paid for it.
I'll add one thing. I do think the CPGs are starting to shift their mindset to have more of a collaborative approach to farmers. I heard an example with Nestle yesterday. I know Unilever's done some programs, so I think that's starting to change rather than just this push down, this is what we demand. I think they're starting to really figure out how they can work with farmers. Farmers aren't the enemy. They're a partner. I think that'll change, especially as we shift from carbon offsets to insets. It's going to be more important for them.
Yeah, is this on still? I think it is. So just wanted to build on that point. So we at TNC actually work with Nestle in the dairy sector right now, and a great example of them becoming more involved in the farm, in what's going on the farm, is that they're working through us as well as Dairy Management Inc. to really provide direct incentives for those farmers to actually adopt some more climate mitigating practices within their dairy operations. So I think investing within their own supply chain is a really good opportunity, and we are working through the co-ops to really see that scale on the ground, because we don't have the buy-in from farmers. Nestle doesn't have the buy-in from farmers. So it's really just, again, retail is kind of that key missing piece to seeing any of these programs going beyond that sort of innovator slice of the farming population and really scale up to a more commodity scale.
So Luke, you mentioned this a little bit earlier around the retailers being the trusted advisor. And one of the things for me in working with CPGs over the years has been that sometimes you get this feeling that they think that the retailer is almost a little bit part of the problem. So 4Rs has been something we've been working on as an industry and trying to really help change that mindset. What advice do you guys have for this group of retailers around how they can get more engaged with the CPGs? I think helping to educate them, helping to get them more involved early. My work with Pepsi and Unilever has been they want to talk to the farmers in December, January, February, when I think everyone in this room would say, we already have our agronomy plans mostly done by that time and maybe have a backup plan. And so when a CPG comes out, that's almost disruptive at that point versus being part of the solution a little bit earlier. So what ideas do you guys have to help them get more engaged with the CPGs and be part of that solution?
Well, very frankly, I just say don't. I just don't think that they can consistently deal with the farmer in the CPG, that they need to go through retail. Yeah. They need to go through people that can deliver the last mile, so to speak. And so, it's really interesting as you get into CPGs in the larger companies. We've been working with Bimbo. We've been working with Pepsi. We've been working with Nestle. When you get to the commodity buying side of their organization, they are still incentivized on how they buy versus the industry. Mm-hmm. And so we got guys that are still worried about a quarter cent a bushel. And so you got to get far enough up in the organization to get above that to get anything done. I don't think that the CPG is ever going to do that well. Mm. And so that's very simply, I think everybody wants to the farmer, right? Everybody, it doesn't matter if it's chemical manufacturers, everybody wants a relationship with the farmer. Nobody understands what it takes to maintain that relationship with the farmer and to do what it really takes. And so I think they need to just quit trying and work through us.
Mm-hmm. I'll add one thing. One of the things that agriculture traditionally has been poor at is speaking with one voice. We talk about it every time we look at a farm bill. I think to the degree that the ag retailers can have a collective voice in front of the CPGs carries a lot of weight. If all of the retailers in this room were able to combine their efforts in the way they interact with those CPGs, I guarantee you there isn't a CPG in America that would turn down a meeting that represented all the ag retailers in this room. So I don't know what efforts are being done along those lines today, but to the degree that could be facilitated would carry a huge weight.
Yeah, I would just add, I definitely agree with those points. I think just from a kind of practical, like what can a retailer do to sort of be that connector to the farmer is just starting early and showing that they want to be engaged and having that conversation with the farmers that you work with too. I think the more that you can be that resource for them to help them navigate some of these opportunities that the CPGs are coming to them with, that over time, I think we all need to work together to really just build awareness that, of just the sort of underlooked but outsized role that retail plays in this space. So I think just being proactive.
So those of you that know me know I could ask these guys questions all day long. So I'm going to pause and see what questions do you have in the audience. Bailey's got a microphone. If you want to just raise your hand, and we'll get out in the audience and see what questions you have in these topics. Is it push? I was going to say, we can hear you. Yeah. You have a good voice.
Maybe I don't have the right American. So Canadian over here.
Yeah.
From I'm curious more on the CPG side. It sounds like there's two things happening, right? And Carl, you hit it right on the head. Like from a procurement side, it's very different than what it is on an ESG side. So maybe just shed some light. I mean, they're out, they're investing in making practical changes on the farm. Dollars are being spent with growers directly. Talk me through how that translates into the procurement side. From a CPG standpoint, is the left hand talking to the right hand? We see it the same, where it's, we've got growers that want to, have these practical solutions, but when it comes time to, the value chain needs to make more dollars out of this as well too. It comes down to the economics of what it's worth to buy that commodity. So whether it's Pepsi or whether it's whoever, you're still competing against other grain producers that are putting that into the marketplace, separate from an ESG.
So maybe just to kind of recap in case you couldn't hear in the back of the room. So the question is around this: is the left hand and the right hand at the ESG or at the CPG really talking to each other? Because part of the company is really driving profitability and commodity, and the other side of the company has some pretty good goals that they're trying to achieve in the sustainability space. And sometimes, I think, Carl, what you alluded to is there's that conflict that happens. And are we seeing that changing in the companies, or how might we see that evolve?
Yeah, I don't know how it evolves. I think it is slowly evolving. I think that we're starting to see sustainability officers having more authority in the organizations. I mean, many times they were almost junior associates, and so we are starting to see some change there. I think it's the battle that we've got to overcome is very simply is can we get paid for the value we deliver, and it's going to be consumer driven. I think we all know that, and I think it's probably hard for us to accept yet today, those that deal in commodity grains, is to understand that there is real value there. There is enough data that says that the consumer is truly driving this thing, that they truly want it. They both want sustainability, they want traceability, they want their, frankly, we want to wake up is the number one concern, and I think this came from some Aimpoint research. The number one concern of our consumers are the chemicals we spray on the crop. They want to know, and they don't like that. And at some point we're going to have to listen to that. So, but back to the original point, my understanding is that and I probably should be a little bit careful, but I believe that Nestle actually went backwards on their sustainability goals. They've made the statement, we will be carbon neutral by 2030, la-di-di, and about a year ago they kind of woke up and said our score is actually worse than when we started. So I think we're starting to see traction, but somebody's got to get paid. I think that's what we've got to understand in this industry, and that's what the CPGs, you can go back a lot of years, but the amount of wheat that's in a loaf of bread today is about 4 cents. Mm-hmm. Okay. There is a lot of margin. We've always known this in ag. There is a lot of margin that is taken between when it leaves the farm and when it hits the consumer. And I think we've got to stand strong on behalf of our farmers and say, we will do whatever you want us to do, but we want some of that margin. But the hard part is we've got to be able to do it at scale, because it doesn't matter if you're going to ship 125 car train a year.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to ship shuttle loads of identity preserved, production practice type wheat, if you want to do that, or corn or whatever. It's got to come at scale, because they can't, otherwise it's too big of an economic disadvantage for them. But I do believe, to answer the question, I do believe that the consumer preferences are starting, for sustainability, are beginning to move their way up the ladder, so to speak, in the CPG, and we are starting to get involved in those conversations.
Yeah, I think you're right in the fact that it's the level of people that are now getting involved. Like 2030 is not that far away. And I think a lot of people have now put those senior level people in place, so they're looking at what they were measuring and how they were measuring it, and maybe realizing we've been measuring the wrong things. So that it does feel like you're going backwards, and probably are, but just the fact that that time frame is sneaking up on them pretty darn quickly, I think is why they're putting some senior leaders in those spots. Luke, did you have a point? Okay. Okay. Great question, Jared. Thank you. Yeah.
So, my name is Nick Biscay. I'm CEO of Stanislaw Farm Supply. We're a retailer with AgVend, Carl and each other, CEO Roundtable. And this stuff we've been dealing with for decades in California.
Mm-hmm.
We work with directly farmers, sun-made growers, Blue Diamond. These are names that people know in the grocery stores. The producers that sit on our board grow cotton for companies like Nike, Gucci, and these conversations are everyday conversations for us. In the boardroom, we have, just to give you guys some straight examples, because this is to kind of walk you through what it looks like. We'll have Bulls Farming, who's one of the oldest farming organizations in California since, well, Spanish. So going before it was a state of California. And they sell their cotton to Nike. Nike will pay them $200 a ton versus $100 a ton, just for simple math, to produce sustainable cotton. Now, when you go through that, and you go, what does that mean, first of all? So the data that it actually takes to deliver that message from where nitrogen is produced in Norway to how it gets to the coast of California, how it gets to the farm, then what crop, what parcel of land it's being produced on, and then all the way to the shoes that you're wearing. So that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's funny because it exists today. The products that we're selling today that are considered, I guess, conventional, actually are being produced sustainably and have a carbon credit that they can claim, but it's not really even being claimed because the value in actually producing that information to the consumer doesn't currently exist for the farmer. So what Carl is saying in terms of the economics, that's the driver as to whether or not they're going to do that. So again, $200 a ton versus $100 a ton, now we have a conversation. Once that conversation exists, then you start going back and finding where it is. So I'll have conversations with Yara and production of Can 17 and what the credit is for that. They'll do that. They'll produce the documentation for the same stuff that we're selling in our tanks today is considered conventional. It's not a segregated product. It's in our tanks today. And all I have to do is get a piece of paper that shows there's a carbon credit with it that you paid for. Okay. Then that piece of paper, I get that produced and they go, okay, well that's Can 17 instead of $300 a ton, it's $500 a ton for that piece of paper that we have. And again, there's numerous products. I'm giving you one example. And so it costs them the farmer to buy it, but now they can bring that talking point, they can bring that value proposition to Nike.
Yeah.
And I'm giving this as real examples. This is stuff we're dealing with right now. But the challenge is they want them to reduce their nitrogen use by 50%. The yield drag that causes for on the acre makes it so that the net back is actually like getting $75 a ton. Even at $200 a ton, the yield drag. So they're doing better financially by just continuing to produce commercially in a conventional sense. So there's a big
miscommunication in terms of what that means. And then it comes down to the actual production and being able to compare that versus conventional. And so we're several years away. We've been struggling with that for years, and we've just proven time and time again back to the farmer that the economics of conventional farming are still superior to any other production method, even including organic. We produce a lot of organic stuff. And so it's a real struggle right now to kind of net that back to the grower, because the proof's in the pudding, and it all comes down to economics, whether or not they're going to make that change. Essentially, it has to be 4x, 5x, just a huge percentage increase, which now when you talk about the intermediary people, the Nikes, they get to a point where they can only absorb 2x. They're only willing to absorb 2x. And so you go to 5x, and now you're getting into their pockets. And they're going to have to start losing money to make that value proposition all the way to the consumer. And so, or the consumer is just going to have to pay significantly more for their shoes than maybe Nike is willing to just absorb. So those conversations are happening right now, every day. It's happening more and more. But it actually comes down to the nuts and the bolts of where the product is produced, where the carbon credit can be documented. And so, in a nutshell, the conversation everybody's having up there is complex. There is no silver bullet. And until we can actually prove out the yield and the economics for the farmer, you're going to see a difficult time getting that to shift. And so, and every single product is different. Every product is different. You could talk about shoes, or you could talk about a bag of almonds that you get at the grocery store. And there's a lot of cost analysis that has to go into that, and accounting to be able to prove out that value proposition. So to ask the retailer to do that when they're trying simply just to get their corn in the ground and they're trying to get a crop off, they have the production schedules that they put together to try to deliver food. It's a huge ask. So, in reality, consumers and government are the ones that are really driving that. And we have that in California too. So you have sustainable groundwater management, nutrient management plans, whole farm incorporation of carbon, like literally having a whole orchard that you have to grind up and then put it back into the soil to get the credits that you're going to pay for doing that, costing you $2,000 an acre. So without the government intervention and funding, it really doesn't happen. And when you get them, the regulation to actually enforce that, you get huge pushback.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it because they're being told they have to do it.
Right.
If they can create an incentive with the consumer products, then to pay for it and give that 5x, then it'll come along.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion, because we deal with it quite a bit in California. So.
Thank you, Nick. Really great examples through that whole process. And I think a lot of the things that you talked about is really what I would like to ask the panel next around. You do a lot of those things. I think what I heard you say, Nick, is on paper. So trying to even bring the information forward to the grower so that they know that the incentives are there, because sometimes they're there and they don't know it. Helping them figure out the ROI, helping them do the traceability is going to take technology. And that's really where AgVend has been very successful at trying to think about what that technology is. So as you guys think about some of those great examples, and we've talked a little bit about this, of being able to provide tools and resources to farmers so it doesn't get to this point of regulation, what ideas do you have that the retailers should be thinking about when it comes to technology that maybe is available to them today, or that you think is going to be important for us as an industry to have in the near future? How will technology play into all this?
I can start this one off because I probably have the most broad answer to it, as not being a technology expert myself. But I would say that there's advantages for retailers to be buying into all the new technology that's coming out, for both enabling the practices on the ground as well as enabling access to markets. So on the practice side, I mean, how many times have you talked to a farmer when you're trying to ask them to try a new product or try a new conservation practice where it's that's not going to work on my field, it's not going to pencil out. even though it's working on their neighbor's field across the road. So I think having very specific data that is already being generated to feed back to the farmer on ROI for doing some of these practices is going to build trust that you know what you're talking about. It's going to make sure that that farmer is being successful with the practices, which leads to less disadoption down the road if there's failure. And it's going to continue to kind of build out your market share in terms of what services you're providing to that farmer. And then on the market side, I think it was brought up last night of we don't have a data problem in ag, we have insights problem. And I see that as kind of like a data opportunity where if farmers want to farm, they don't want to have to deal with all of this insane amounts of data that are coming out of their yield monitors and from all these different programs. So I think there's just a real opportunity there for, yes, we aren't there yet. This is a big ask for retail to get more involved in this space often, but I don't know who else is going to do it because retail just has such influence and such trust with the farmers already. So I think that's something that is a battle that's being fought on multiple fronts to figure out how this works. But retail plays a crucial role in that.
Thanks.
So yeah, I have some thoughts here. So Tyler mentioned last night that I think he said 71% of farmers aren't using their data, the data that they have available to them. I think when you look at, especially in the areas of sustainability and traceability, that data is going to become increasingly more important. The data is going to be more valuable both financially and functionally as it aggregates. So the more data you can combine, the more valuable it is. The simple fact is, as these CPGs, as governments, as policies start to, or increasingly incentivize sustainable and traceable practices, they're going to be dependent upon that data. So on one side, it's difficult because we're almost asking the farmers to go grocery shopping without telling them what we're cooking for dinner. But they need to be holding all of this data because there's going to be a grant in 2030 that says, hey, give us the previous 5 years of your practices, and that's going to be your eligibility requirement. There's going to be hundreds of things like that. So where I think AgVend can step in is becoming a repository for all of that data. Again, some of it we don't know exactly what will be required, but a lot of it we do. And I think Tyler also mentioned the easy button, to the degree that can be easy for the farmer, that they can hold that data in preparation of what's to come, because it is coming. We may not know exactly everything, precisely, but we know it's coming, and we know data is going to empower it.
Wow, are you sure?
For the first time, I have nothing to add.
Thank you, guys. Great points. I think spot on with data, right? Of how much data we all have. It was fascinating for me. I didn't really go through my background in my introduction, but when I was at AgTegra, working in the agronomy division, it would floor me how much data we had. But being able to use it and have the insights to be able to go out and have those conversations. Jennifer's in the room here. If it wasn't for her running reports for me constantly, it was difficult to go have those conversations and to really arm our agronomists with the right information, or our grain merchandisers with the right information to go out and have those discussions. So I agree with Tyler's comment last night of just it's an insights problem, and we're pretty excited to be able to help think through these things and really try to find some of those solutions. So thank you for those points. What other questions, comments from the room in the back there?
Tracy, so when we continue to talk about traceability in the agriculture industry, one of the biggest questions I would have is who owns the data we continue to talk about out there? Is that data, is it owned by the landlord? Is it owned by me as a farmer? Is it owned by us as the retailers writing the prescription? When we do a 5-year look back on that, and we want to try to provide that information, who owns that in everyone's opinion up there?
Yeah, really great question that comes up pretty frequently, doesn't it? Is just data ownership and who actually owns it. And I don't. You've spent a lot of time in the traceability space, Nelson. Do you have thoughts about that, or things that you guys, any of the three of you, have seen in some of these recent conversations around data ownership?
I'd say if you can figure out how to own it, you'll be rich. Yeah, it's even more complex than that. I mean, we have customers who want to aggregate data that, because for legal reasons, for privacy reasons, for a litany of other reasons, they can't put their data together. By the way, not technological reasons. The technology's there, but it's a very complex thing. Not only who owns it, but how you make that data speak to one another, how you get access to one system and another system. I think, unfortunately, I don't think there's an answer today. You said you hear it all the time. No, I've never been to one of these things and someone raise their hand and say, I know who owns the data. It's disparate pieces of data that have multiple ownerships. And there's a lot of complexity to it. I think it'll start to be solved. There may need to be some regulatory changes as well to allow some of that data to speak to one another. And probably a lot of lawyers, unfortunately.
Yeah, we would certainly believe that the farmer owns the data, and I think when this sorts out, that's where it will end up. And the problem is he doesn't value the data, so he's willing to give it away. And we continually tell them that their data as an individual probably isn't that important, but the aggregate, as has been mentioned here, is the key, and others will use that. So we're certainly going at it with the attitude that the farmer will own the data, and being a cooperative, that kind of makes sense for us.
But you're speaking of on-farm data. Because, I mean, we look at the data, it's across the value chain, and there's data on one side of the value chain that informs the other side. So that's when I say the ownership is difficult. I would agree with you. The farmer owns his data. I don't know, Tyler's here. Does John Deere agree with that? I don't know.
They do. Actually, they do, but yeah.
Okay, good. But the whole point is, the farmers still, they need data from the ag retailer and the CPGs and all of that, because that informs what they do.
So I always joke, we've had this conversation with climate. You know what the #1 hybrid planted in the United States is under climate's data?
#1.
Corn.
It's true.
Corn. Pull into the field, won't even put the hybrid in. Just corn, because once again, it's an inside issue, right? We have not found the right value proposition to induce the farmer to value data.
So that's exactly what I was just going to hit on, Carl, and I think you can speak to this really well around when we can show the farmers that there is value for them, they are willing to share that data in a way that will help them to advance their farming operation. Would you agree with that from what you've seen?
As long as it's easy.
Great point.
I mean, that's the key today is and frankly, we've put almost 600,000 acres into the Truterra model. Mm-hmm. We have done that. Yeah. We may have one farmer that put in his own data. Mm-hmm. We did it all for them. So once again, they just, we're still, once again, we've got to get over, I don't mean to belabor that issue, but success is not a good teacher. And there is absolutely no reason in their minds, frankly, in their minds and in 90% of my company's mind, for us to change what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's because they've made a lot of money, they've built great net worth, and they think weather is more important than what they do in farming practices.
Yeah. I think if you guys have talked a lot about ROI, I think each of you have mentioned it, and a lot of times we think of, and this was a little bit of Jared's point of, it's hard ROI and it's money, but time is money for these guys also, and a lot of them are running this like a business operation, and so their time is as valuable, and so making sure that simple piece, we kind of throw that to the wind that's obvious, but it is so critical for them when they think about how much time they spend on these things where they could go be doing something else that they see as more valuable.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you. I mean, I've got guys farming 5,000 acres that are working less than 6 months a year.
Do you think, though, it's because they've figured out how to manage their time? Maybe.
No, they haven't had to.
They haven't had to.
They haven't had to. I mean, it's once again, you go to a pure row crop farmer, and he spends his time in the spring, and if he doesn't irrigate, he's even less than that.
Sure.
And so, And we still scout their acres, by the way.
Yeah. So it probably ties back into segmentation of just not making assumptions based on the size of the farmer or age of the farmer, but it's actually getting to know them and understanding what their practices are and what they need to tie back into how we have this conversation with them. Yeah, great. Great, thank you. Other questions?
Carl, you mentioned earlier, and I agree with you, that the ag retailer has to carry this carbon for the farmer. Do you believe in the future that carbon will have to be a publicly traded commodity in order to make it sustainable?
So, yes, I do believe that carbon will be a tradable commodity, but I also believe that carbon sequestration in ag farm ground will be too expensive and won't play in that arena. It'll be the other practices that around sustainability that matter. It just won't be a carbon conversation.
Great question. Other questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead, James.
I think the gentleman from California brought some good points. How do we measure sustainability, right? There's I don't know, there's so many different ways to do that. What's important to one person is not important to the other. And some of the examples he gave, some of those practices that we're asking for of fewer inputs is leading to more inputs per unit of production. From the CPGs and others, you said there's changes coming, and what are they looking at?
Yeah.
Are there more common sense, realistic ones that you're seeing that are trends that might spread further, like nitrogen use efficiency, things like that? Are there any of those common ones that we really need to start looking at?
Great question, Jason. So just if you didn't hear him, really thinking about trade-offs. So when they're asking you in California to use less nitrogen, what are the trade-offs and what are the other things? Because that can result in lower production as what you heard. What are the CPGs doing in this space as you see them evolving? And are there other areas that they should be thinking about, like nitrogen use efficiency or other tools that are out there from your discussions?
Well, you're right. It depends on who you ask. We ask a lot of questions about sustainability when we do research. You ask a farmer what sustainability is, he says the ability to be in business next year. That's how he defines sustainability. I think different CPGs have different objectives. It may be a fair wage. It may be some sort of chemical use or carbon, it's across the board. I think it'll start to converge. One of the questions I had for the California example is, has anyone talked to Nike? I mean, it's simple business. We can force all those guys to meet those standards, and they'll be out of business in 2 years. So you won't have any sustainable cotton producers. That's pretty easy math for smart people in Nike to figure out, you would think. Things are strange in California sometimes. But yeah, but I think there's an education between the CPGs and the reality of the producers. And that conversation is just starting to happen. The consumers are driving it. But I think there's a lot of corporate entities that want things to happen, and they have no idea what it takes to really make them happen on the ground. And that conversation needs to happen, and that process I think will converge some realistic definitions around sustainability.
Just kind of give an answer to some of the comments you're making. So like nitrogen is the low-hanging fruit. That's the easiest one to do. Who here in the room retailers sell human 32? Or 28, right? In the Midwest. So right now we have information that we're able to reduce the use of human 32 or 28 by 25% and not create a yield risk. So, but that formulation is a product you have to create Then once that carrot exists, then they'll go and say, hey, I want to buy that. And then you have to be able to take that savings information from the farm. And then, got to vertically integrate it all the way back into production, right? But actually that value is happening at the retailer. So that formulation of that product is actually being made by the retailer. And so that's where you
wrap
have
you
to
up.
capture it, and then it goes to the farmer, then it goes to the
We can
commodity,
discuss it at the
and any
breakout,
commodity,
too.
because everything is
But I think we're starting to see some of the CPGs willing to pay for the carrot. It's starting to happen.
I probably shouldn't do this, but so, and I'll talk about wheat because we've done the most work with wheat. So the quality of wheat that we raise in the United States today has dropped so much over the last 30 years that we are adding tremendous amounts of vital wheat gluten to be able to make flour and bread. So in it, and this won't be current today, it'd be pretty close. 4 cents of wheat in a loaf of bread, there's 18 cents of vital wheat gluten in a loaf of bread. Wheat gluten, very expensive. Then when you add the wheat gluten, you have to start adding other chemicals because the wheat gluten reduces the, I was going to say sustainability, but the shelf life. And so you start adding other things and it gets very expensive. The point of that is we've worked with a company called Farm Strategies that we're part owner of in Kansas. We had to prove the economic value of higher quality wheat to Bimbo, the #1 baker in the world. They get so focused on the commodity price. So my point is, and like I said, probably shouldn't do this. I'm not sure that sustainability is the economic reason to do much. I think the consumer wants it. I think it's a byproduct of real economic value creation. Means, I will tell you, we start testing #2 yellow corn. And with the yield advances that we've seen in #2 yellow corn in the last 20 years, we're going to find out that our nutrient density has got the same problem wheat does. And we're going to find economic answers to that. These are truly, we have a variety of wheat today that increases the bakeability of bread, and its value today, proven value today, is $23 a bushel versus $5 a bushel for commodity wheat. I think there are other economic answers that we've got to be searching for. So what has happened with Farm Strategies is, as we are then doing the traceability to prove out that we have this wheat and we can deliver it, okay, sustainability just comes with it. It's just a secondary thought. I don't know that there's enough value in the chain to do it just on sustainability. So I apologize. I know that's what this panel is about, is sustainability. But I think sustainability is a byproduct. Now, I don't think it changes anything for AgVend, in that we still have got to develop the tools to be able to identify what we're raising, how we're raising it, when we're raising it, and that continues. So I think the answer, as far as the technology revolution, is the same.
Yeah.
But I don't know that sustainability in and of itself has enough economic value to drive the ship.
Yeah.
Because we see it, in answer to your question is, what should we be doing? Well, it depends on what CPG you're talking to. It depends on, and it's kind of the Wild West, and most of them did it as a marketing campaign. They didn't do it as a real thing, and now they're going,
Now
oh
it's
crap.
getting real. Yeah.
Now I got to live up to this.
Yeah.
And when they find out what it takes to live up to it, they're not going to like it. And so so we're focused on, let's get to the real economic values instead of arguing over 5 cents a bushel. It just blows my mind that the proven value of this wheat is $23 a bushel.
Yeah.
Now you give a farmer $5 a bushel of that 23 value, and he'll plant it all day long, right?
Conversation changes.
Right. So
Yeah.
and there's others in this room that are doing some of those things too. I know.
Yeah. So I'm just going to wrap up the panel of just asking each of you to share, are there ideas, thoughts around collaborations, resources that are available to retailers as they think about, Carl, maybe not just sustainability, but just even changing the conversation upstream and downstream, but being part of that solution, resources that are out there that you guys want to be sure they're aware of?
I can start with this one. So obviously, TNC is coming at this from a different perspective than within industry. So we see the goals around environmental sustainability as being for the purpose of creating a more resilient and healthy food system and addressing some of the biggest threats through agriculture's outsized role in that. So we see tremendous opportunity there. One of the collaborations that we're working on right now that I'd like everyone to be aware of is we are working with Purdue University, because we are really committed to finding a sort of industry-driven solution to making farming more sustainable. And a lot of this just comes down to making the business case for retailers to really diversify into more service-based business models, essentially, and adding in some of these conservation practices, working with growers on access to these markets as part of their portfolio. So we are working with Purdue University, creating in a sense, a business simulation tool that really lets you put in your current structures, your current paths of revenue, and look at how that would affect your bottom line by incorporating some of these more diverse conservation service offerings into your portfolio over time under various projected models of what that could look like. So we think this is a really cool opportunity, and I think it lines up well with what AgVend's doing too, just in the sense that it's helping retailers get specific data on ROI for their business of what this is going to look like. Because this change, at least for the near to midterm, the focus is not going to go away on sustainability. So I think whatever we can do to create opportunity for retailers to help scale that is really important. Right now, that project is in a pilot phase where Purdue is basically sitting down and having conversations with leaders from various retailers to really talk through this tool and figure out basically one-on-one consultations to really find out where are those business opportunities for that particular retailer. And I think this is super crucial that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So we need more tools like this because every retailer's context is different geographies, different crops, and all of that. So if this is something that you want to learn more about, we're always looking for more folks to get involved in this. And the hope is that once we get through this pilot phase, that this will be a more standalone tool that retailers can engage with and really use that to make decisions going forward. So.
Thank you. So in the back of your book, there's a note section, and I would write this down as Ag Retail in Transition is the Purdue study. They started it in 2021, and it's really talks about how you can utilize a service-based model in sustainability. And as Luke said, it was just kind of getting started. They're in phase 2 of it right now, but it's a really great resource for you that a lot of you are doing the things that are in that document, in that working paper, but it'll kind of help you think about it in another way to really drive some service revenue from this space. So thank you for bringing that up. Carl, Nelson, anything you want to wrap with?
Go ahead.
I know we talked a lot about CPGs, and I know Carl talked a lot about the financial sustainability, and these things have to pencil out. I think on the farm side, that's absolutely true. If you look at the value chain today, and you look at it from right to left, you've got 350 million consumers in the U.S. on one side. You've got roughly 3 million farmers on the other side. You try to draw a line between every farmer and every consumer, there's a bottleneck in the middle. And the bottleneck is the CPGs and the grocery retailers. There's very few of those. I mean, probably 4 or 5 of them control most of the market. That's where the power is. When we look at our society today, we've got the baby boomers are starting to roll out. They're going into retirement. The next generation, Gen Z and millennials, they're going to have $4 trillion worth of buying power by 2030. And they have the ear of those CPGs. And they're demanding the way that our farmers do business to be different. And the entities that are in the best position to help the farmers are y'all, the ag retailers, to help them navigate all that complexity that's going to be honestly shoved down their throats in some way. And I think y'all can be that voice that pushes back, that says, yeah, if you demand something from them, they'll go out of business. It has to be a partnership. It has to be a collaboration. And I think AgVend's probably in a great position too to be part of that voice and to help navigate the expectations of those corporations vis-a-vis the reality of actual production. So I think when you talk about collaborations, you kind of have two choices. You can either be proactive or reactive, and I think that the people in this room, their ability to be proactive towards those groups is powerful. Mm-hmm. And honestly, those groups want it. They're wanting to get into this space, and I think even as big as they are and as powerful as they are, they need help connecting to the farmer, and y'all are the ones that can help them connect.
Yeah, resources. I mean, frankly, the best resources are probably sitting in this room. So collaboration among these groups. These issues are bigger than any one of our organizations. They're too costly to develop. They're too hard to handle by ourselves. So we're going to have to work together. I would certainly make a case, even though it hasn't been perfect, for the work that Truterra is doing. I think that they'll continue to get that lined out, and there's some good tools there that at least there's some learnings. But I think the best answer is talking to other retailers and what are we working and what's working for you, what's not, and how can we work together is what I'd go.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you three for taking some time this morning. Obviously, a very complex conversation, some things that you guys can do now and in the near future. But most of all, it sounds to me like just having conversations with each other. So help me thank the three of them for being part of this conversation.